Shut up and sit down. Shut up and sit down.
Alright guys, this is Bigmeks Workshop and Paint Studio. I'm Dodge, and today we are painting the Praetorian from Forge World, which is a very nice model with lots of details to it. So we're going to be painting this up, and this is probably going to be one of the last tutorials for a year. Unlike with most of our tutorials, we have used a black prime, but we've gone over it with Vallejo's Israeli Sand Prime. That's how we've got this sort of bone colour, Carrick Stone by Games Workshop sort of look. Now I'm going to have to enhance and edit this video a lot to make sure the whites show up, as it's quite difficult to get whites on the camera. And we're going to start using model colour Sky Grey. I'm going to be glazing a lot for the first part of this video. We're going to try and get the armour done and out of the way so we can throw some colour on. It's going to help the camera focus. Next we're going to add a little bit of game colour Ghost Grey, sort of a 50-50 mix, just to help the transition a little bit easier. And we're going for about the 2/3 of all the panels. We have left a small amount of Israeli sand showing through the underneath there as well, as we want a nice transition from those dark areas. Now we're going to water down some Agrax Earthshade by Games Workshop. You can see that's very thin. Best to do this in very thin layers. Make sure you don't overdo it. And we're going to follow each of those panels and pull all that into the shaded areas. This will really help those curves on that armour look more three-dimensional, which is definitely something you want, as the armour sculpt for this is very interesting. It's got lots of shape to it, so bringing those out is really going to do the model well. Next we're going to put Ghost Grey and Sky Grey together and go back over again. This is just because we've put a filter on there, and now it's time to start bringing those edges and about the first quarter back up. Next we're going to be using Game Colours Ghost Grey on its own. But this isn't an edge highlight, because later on we will be doing an edge highlight with a different colour. We'll be doing all the edges at the end of the video together. Right, so I decided to start throwing some colours on this just to help the camera focus on the model a little bit better. So we're going to use model colours Burnt Red, and that's going to be uniform all the way around the shoulder pads and the trims on the legs. Need a smooth coat to bring it out properly, make it pop. After that I'm going to start blocking in the leather sections on his front, and then we're going to use Scale 75's black leather for that. You could use a brown or the classic Games Workshop sort of leather colours, where you start with Dryad Bark and go up to Gothor Brown, put some Agrax Earthshade washes on it, but I decided I was going to use the Scale 75 leather for this one. Next up I want to jump up to the eagle, and we're going to put on Burnt Umber by Model Air. Although you don't have to do this as this step, because I did change my mind later on and I thought the colour for the eagle was a little bit off, or a little bit orange and bright for my liking, so I went back over and changed that. Next up I'm going to start picking out some of these other panels on his armour, the other decorative parts. He's got some under his neck as well. We're going to use Scale 75's Decay Metal for that. We've been using this colour scheme to paint most of the white scars that Andy's been doing. There is a few variations as we're doing a bit more detail here and there just to make the video worth watching, make it a bit better. Now to start the face, we're going to use Scale 75's Chink Orange. The face sculpt for this is really nice, so make sure you keep this paint really thin. And try not to clog up all the details like the lips and the eyes. Next, we're just going to add Games Workshop's UNGOR Flesh into the Chink Orange, and this started to give a nice colour. As we're going for sort of a kind of flesh, well, they're Mongolian based, so we're going for a slightly different skin tone. I did like the results we got with this one. You want to keep this really thin, and as I always say on videos, you want to start by putting the most paint on the eyebrows and nose and then working the rest so your highlight just sticks there naturally. After that, we're simply going to add even more UNGOR Flesh and just start building that face up even further. Again, we're going to be hitting those same spots, eyebrows, the top of the head, because that's where the light's going to reflect. Next, just to tone all that together, make everything a little bit smoother on his face, we're going to use a REKLAND Flesh Shade Wash by Games Workshop. While working on this face, you want to be really careful not to miss the face and get paint anywhere else on the armour, because as it's white, any paint and mistake on it will show up like a lot more than with other models. So white is quite awkward to paint, but it's also quite unforgiving as well. Next, we're going to start highlighting the rest of the armour, all the red sections. We're going to start highlighting those with Scale 75's Blood Red. And I do like this red section for Scale 75 as the colour progression is so steady that you don't actually have to do 50-50 mixes like with Games Workshops. Scale 75 again, but this time it's Antares Red. You can see how subtle of a difference that makes, but as we build up those layers it does become more and more pronounced. And always remember to leave space for the next layer as well, so you want a little bit of this showing on the underneath. You guys should also let me know if you do prefer the black background. I might start using that more often, as long as I'm not using the airbrush for anything. Because it's a felt background, so I obviously don't want to be spraying paint and primer over it. Next up, we're going to start adding, well, we're going to add to the top of that Aldebaran. Aldebaran. We're going to start adding to that Aldebaran Red, which is a slightly warmer, more orangey red, but that shape of the shoulder pads is really being brought out here. Starting from the areas where you want the least amount of paint and stopping in the centre at the top of those shoulder pads, letting it dry or working your way around the model and then coming back to that. After that, it is Tindalos Red. I'm basically just going to go over most of those leather straps with this, leaving some of the black leather in the underneath. This was to make the edges look like they were already highlighted, and I'm just going to put the Tindalos Red in between the strips, leaving the edges already done. We will come back and do some more work with these, but I thought that with the rest of the armour this was actually a good colour combination. And use, we're going back to the face now, it's dry, and we're going to just use UNGOR Flesh by Games Workshop on its own now. At this point we're being very sparing with where we put it. But yeah, his face is pretty much 3 different paints. And to to get a decent result, all I've been doing is mixing the paint and putting them on in very, very small layers in very specific places. Next, we're going to use Monocolor's Flat Earth. And I'm going to use that to start colouring in that fur, because we decided we'd go for a sort of a lion, hyena, some sort of desert-based animal for these guys. I thought that would be more fitting. Although we do have a tutorial coming up at some point soon when we get around to it on different colours of fur. After that, I'm just going to add an Agrax Earthshade wash over the top just to darken it down and add some depth. But I'm also going to put the Agrax Earthshade wash on the leather straps on the underneath as well. Start adding some shade to those. So having both these steps done at once just made life a little bit easier. Next, we're going to use Scale 75's Victorian Brass, and we're going to use that to highlight the decay metal that we started earlier. After that, I'm going to use Games Workshop's Khorne Red. I'm going to start bringing out the rope on the front of his armour. Started with Khorne Red because we need to be picking different reds and different shades, otherwise all those reds will look the same, especially on a model that's predominantly white, and we need something for the eyes to pick up, so the model just does not look like a block of white anymore. I also did the I'm not sure, it's not hair, some kind of decoration. Did those in the Khorne Red as well, and CARRBURG Crimson. I'm not sure what they're called. Several times in this video now I've decided to actually just apply a colour and then immediately darken it down without highlighting it. It's probably something I'll experiment with more, as then I can simply just highlight it with its own, highlight the same colour with itself, and have very subtle transitions in it. Next, we're going to add Game Air Earth, and you could dry brush these, but spent quite a bit of time working on the armour plating for this, so decided to stay in control and just paint over the top of the fur one little bit at a time, just starting from the top of the fur and then pulling down so you don't hit any of the fur underneath it that you don't want to. It does enable you to stay in control of where the paint goes, and the highlights go for this as well. Next up, we're going to add a null oil to the things at the top. I have no idea what they're called. But the White Scars army does have quite a few of these tufts of like hair or fur. I'm going to use Panzer Dark Rust and go straight over that eagle again. I wasn't happy with the colour that it was, and I found that a Panzer Dark Rust was probably just a better colour for this, at least a better starting colour anyway. But it's entirely up to you. Andy wanted to paint the thing like a parrot, just for a laugh. It would have been interesting. And that led us on to a whole conversation about making pirate space marines for whatever reason. Now we're going to add Flat Earth by Model Colour into the Dark Rust by Panzer Racers. And same way we did the fur, we're going to just follow each feather with the very, very tip of the brush. And just gently put some strokes on those. It's best to be patient with a model with this sort of shape. It does look really time consuming and tedious, but if you get a good rhythm going, it's quite easy to do. Next, all we're going to do is add some RAKARTH flesh into that previous mix of Flat Earth and Dark Rust. And just follow all those feathers again. So it's now a lighter colour, but we're also going to apply less paint to it, which is going to help bring out that shape, make it look a bit more three-dimensional. Now we're going to go back to the weird hair things, and we're going to use corn red, which was its base, as we've done a bunch of washes, and just highlight itself with that. And like I was saying before, this is one of those models you want to be really careful when pulling your brush away from it. It's so easy to put a streak along your nice white armour. And at this point I've also done his moustache and hair with, I think it was, I can't remember which grey it was. It was one of the black greys by Model Colour, I believe. Next we're going to start highlighting again the weird hair things with MEPHISTON red. As the Games Workshop colour series is, well, the reds for Games Workshop, as the reds for Games Workshop are a slightly different colour and hue, so we can get away with putting these on. And it not looking too much like the armour and the rest of the model. Next up, I think this might be one of the final highlights for this. We're just going to use Evil Sunz Scarlet by Games Workshop. After that, I'm going to use Army Painter Strong Tone over the fur again, as we've done some highlight work on there. Army Painter Strong Tone looks similar to an Agrax Earthshade, but it's different enough. I believe Agrax Earthshade is a little bit more reddish, whereas this one is actually a little bit more on the yellow side of things. And at this point I also decided to use that same wash on the eagle as well, to just add a little bit more depth and help blend in those previous paints that we've put on it. Next we're going to use Game Air Earth, and we're going back to the fur, highlighting less and less now, just the top corners where his shoulders will be most pronounced. You want to be quite sparing with this colour, as it's quite a bright one and it's easy to go over the top with it. I'm going to use WAZDAKKA red to start highlighting the rope. It was a bit odd painting this and just working with all these different shades of red, trying not to get them all mixed up. And after that I decided to throw on the Agrax Earthshade wash at this point for the metallic parts that we did, the decay metal and Victorian brass. And at this point the model's slowly starting to come together. I'm going to switch to Steel by Model Air Metallic now to start picking out the metallic parts, or the metal gears and workings at the back of the armour. Didn't see the need to go into too much detail with these. Silvers were relatively simple. We're also going to use the same silver here for filling in the gaps in between his armour for his knees and arm joints. After that, I'm going to use Model Colour, Flat Earth, and so that's the same mix. It's going to be Flat Earth again, Panzer Dark Aces Rust, and RAKARTH Flesh. Because if you watch the channel a lot, you'll know I'll mix RAKARTH Flesh into almost anything to highlight it. And now that's starting to get a nice bit of shape to it there. Now I'm going to add some RAKARTH flesh to the WAZDAKKA and start highlighting the rope in the same fashion. When it comes to the rope, just follow the twists on the rope all the way around. Just putting small little highlights across all of them, rather than putting a big brush stroke over the top of them, over the top of the rope, and risking filling in all your details. Now I'm going to throw a null oil on the back of that, on the back of the metallic parts. We are going to put an oil wash on this, so if you're looking at it now thinking it's still a bit flat, most of the time on the channel we'll put a null oil wash, and most of the time on the channel we'll put an oil wash on there just to get right into those recesses and bring out those details. Top of the melter gun, or the melter gun barrel even, was done with Balthasar gold as a base. There's not really much to say about that one. Just take your time with your gun. Separating all the parts is always worth doing properly. Next we're going to use Model Air Sand. And I think this is the last highlight for the fur. I'm just jumping back and forth at this point with the video and the tutorial, just trying to get the model done. So again, we're going to add RAKARTH flesh to the WAZDAKKA, but we're just going to add a little bit more RAKARTH flesh. And every time we do, we're just going to make the front of that rope and the tops of it ever so slightly lighter. Next, we're going to use model colour beige brown to start covering. We're going to use model colour beige brown to start working on the sheath for his sword. This will require a couple of thin coats, as it tends to be quite a thick paint. And while I'm doing this, waiting for that to dry, I'm going to throw on scale 75's peanut butter to start picking out the feet for the eagle and the beak for the eagle as well. Didn't seem necessary to go into extreme detail for those parts, but we will add some washes and whatnot to them later. Decided to throw some blue on these cables just to give us a little bit more contrast, as everything's so monotone or red. So we used model colour dark Prussian blue. Going back to the sheath now. All I'm going to do here is put an army painter strong tone on it again. I'm going to give that a couple of washes, I believe, just to start adding some depth to it. Again, be very careful with your washes, as you don't want these to run off onto your model and ruin all that white that you've done. And for the handle of his weapon, I've decided to go for red leather by scale 75. Which is again, it's from the leather set of scale 75, so if you get that for your collection, the fact it says leather implies it's used for leather. You can use it for other things, but as a set based solely for leather, they have got a very nice range there. Next, RAKARTH flesh. What a surprise. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start bringing out the chest of the eagles. I still thought it looked a little bit boring. Just changing the colour ever so slightly, making sure the RAKARTH flesh sits mainly in the centre of his chest, and then feathering it out around the edges. After the RAKARTH flesh, I'm going to use Screaming Skull by Games Workshop and just start re-highlighting those feathers at the front. Next, we're going to use beige brown and RAKARTH flesh, of course. We're going to cover most of the sheath with this. Just letting the Agrax Earthshade that we put, the Army Painter Strong Tone show through. Just start building up the edges of this sheath, just towards the top. And I did like the beige brown RAKARTH flesh look for a leather or a pouch. It's a bit different to the other ones, so it makes it stand out a little bit more. We're on to the last set of colours. So now I'm just going to add more RAKARTH flesh to that, because we can actually use RAKARTH flesh as the top colour for this, and that would work really nicely. Strings, we're going to use model colour beige. It's not necessary to go too over the top with this, as long as it's nice and neat. It is a bit awkward to get to the strings or laces on the other side, but I did find that this model colour beige gave a real nice contrast to the leather work that's behind it. Model colour ivory into the model colour beige. Ivory's it's very similar to the beige, it's just a bit lighter. Now we're just going to do the top bits of those strings, from the middle section to the top. Next, we're going to put an Agrak First Shade over the whole lot of that, and that's going to help tie that whole lot together. Oh, I also do the eagle's chest as well, just to help put some extra shade back in those bits that we did a minute ago with the RAKARTH flesh and ivory. Next, I'm going to throw on a little bit of Games Workshop Rust Grey just over the top of those pipes. I wanted them to look a bit more three-dimensional, and Rust Grey for this actually worked out to be a really good highlight for the dark Prussian blue, so I'll see if I can find something else to use that on as well. After that, I'm going to use RAKARTH flesh with the scale 75 red leather, which the red leather was the base that we did this handle on. And it's got quite a few strings on that as well, so I'm going to start picking those out, just lightening them up a little bit. For the gun, we've been keeping these black for this army, so model colour German grey. It's a very nice dark grey, and it lets you use your prime or your null oil washers on it in the recesses to make things look a little bit more three-dimensional. It's a very natural highlight for black. Next up, we're going to use ESHIN Grey by Games Workshop. I want to use that to start bringing in those edges. I do dot about the model here and there, and add some little bits here and there off the camera, but all the paints are the paints. Any paints that I've added are paints off the desk that have been used in this project. Once we've got those edges down, we're going to go over them again, well, not the entirety of them, mainly the corners, and we're going to go for Games Workshop's Dawnstone. Those two do work, the ESHIN Grey and the Dawnstone, they do work very well together for highlighting blacks. And for the armour trim, for the edge highlights, we're going to use model colour off-white. As when we're painting whites, we don't actually paint straight with a white. You've got to start with all the other colours first and then start building them up. So off-white, that was always going to be the top edge highlight, because it's the most bright white we're going to be putting on the model at all. Everything else is a different shade or tone. Next, I'm going to use Mars Orange by Scale 75. And Mars Orange is what it says on the tin. It's quite a vibrant orange. And we're going to use that, highlight all that red trim. And that's really going to help that look three-dimensional and pop. After that, we're going to bring up the metallic work that we did again, but we're going to use Amber Alchemy by Scale 75, as the metallic work itself really didn't seem to need too much work, because everything else is sculpted in that certain way, and there's such a small amount of the metallic parts, it's easy just to get away putting a few colours and a wash or two on. Just going to keep applying that Amber Alchemy on his metal parts there, right to the top right hand corner. And as I was saying about the sheath, we're just going to go for RAKARTH flesh and use that as the top highlight on its own, as the sheath itself is actually made up of layers of RAKARTH flesh mixed with other colours. We're just going to finish off with the silver highlights for this part of the video, and it's going to be Model Air Metallic Steel to highlight those silver bits. And then after this, we are going to be applying a pin wash all the way around, which I found was a lot more difficult than I thought it would be at the time, as he's got very smooth armour and the oil's just very unforgiving as it leaves quite a black stain. Maybe I could have used engine grease instead, which is a slightly different colour. And there you have it, guys. This one took quite a lot of time and even more time to edit, so I do hope you like watching this one. I know I've sounded a bit tired throughout this video. That's because me and Andy are getting towards the end of the year now, and we're looking forward to taking time off. So, like I was saying, this might in fact be your last tutorial for a few weeks, as we're probably going to be spending time with the family and whatnot with this season. So I do hope you like that, guys. I do hope it helps you with the whites. I'm going to try and enhance that image so you can see the white colours a bit better through sections of the video. We have some thank yous to give out though, because we love all your support, guys, especially our patrons who help support us and pay for models for this channel. The Alt Boys, Matt, Ludwig Hofbauer, D-Wack, Mark and Dave, you guys are awesome. Top paying patrons, so they get all their perks. If you want to join them on Patreon and help support the channel, links are in the description, along with links for eBay, for bases and everything else as well. All that good stuff's in the description. A big thank you to the Outpost as well. That's our affiliate link, and they're also in the description along with everything else. If you follow that link, you can get 15 to 20% off all hobby supplies, including the ranges of Games Workshop's stuff and many more. And if you follow that link, we get a decent. So that is all from us. Bad luck for this. I will probably see you in the new year. Thanks for watching, guys. Catch you later.